What is this?
Difference. You think it's just. You think it's right for a world to exist in which people can basically make you suck their dick for coconuts, and you think it's more just if there's a way to become the person whose dick is sucked for the coconuts. But I don't think so. I think you should be able to exist outside of that paradigm if you so desire, because I actually advocate for, you know, personal freedom. I think that social democracy is a improvement on some fronts, but that ultimately it perpetuates a lot of the core problems that we have with our current system. And so I don't buy the sales pitch.
Sure. So here's my question. Let's say we lived in a Nordic country, but everyone got $3,000 a month.
Sure.
And they didn't have to do anything for it. It was a UBI. Would you say we've accomplished your system because they ultimately can do whatever they want now?
No, because first of all, I mean, no, I don't think so. I don't think that anybody can really do what they want. There's other issues that are.
Why not?
Well, wait,
they have the money. They have the perfect. They have income and security.
Did you want an answer, or did you
security.
think, or were you like trying to capitalize on like a dunk or something? Do you want the answer or no?
Well, no, I'm trying. It's a genuine question because if someone
then you got
has
the answer.
the
If it's a
income,
genuine
but
question,
they
you
can do
got
whatever
the
they
answer.
want.
If it's a
why
genuine, I
aren't
understand
they,
what you're saying.
How does this not solve your for your
my
system?
friend. I understand.
Yeah, go for it.
The what you know, the hypothetical. I get it. First of all, UBI. If it could happen, that would be fantastic. Of course, I'm never going to fight against a UBI. I think UBI is.
I want to point this out more when I see more and more of this happening. When Demon Mama refuses to engage in an answer and she just keeps talking and talking, it's because she doesn't have an answer for it. I notice this. All the posture, like, oh, you're so upset, like, oh, I'm getting there, blah blah blah. UBI would be great, blah blah. Like all this talking is because she doesn't have an answer for the question.
Is a great thing. But let's be real. First of all, there are going to be strings attached to that. Whether it's, you know, citizenship.
That's not the hypothetical, though.
But okay, what's the hypothetical? Give me the
hypothetical
full
is everyone gets $3,000 a month for nothing input into the system.
Okay.
That ultimately that's what they get. They can do with it as they please.
Okay, sick.
I
so
feel like I've
$3,000 a month
intellectually.
is meaningless to me because I have no idea what the cost of everything is. I have no idea what that actually buys for you, or if
Obviously,
it even gives
talking within an American context where $3,000 a month is a living wage.
Sure. Yeah, it depends on where you live, but sure. Yeah, that's great. That's a step in the right direction. I think that's fantastic. If everybody gets a living wage, that gives people a whole lot more ability to just not participate. And that also puts pressure on companies to offer things more than just coconuts for dicks. But I don't think it solves all the problems that we're talking about. I just think it's a step in the right direction. I think that a UBI has other issues that are structural. Like, for example, I imagine that, like, obviously, if we want to go into a complete hypothetical where every person in the world just received $3,000, I don't know what that even means anymore. But if we're talking about
wait, what?
I think that a UBI has other issues that are structural. Like, for example, I imagine that, like, obviously, if we want to go,
would you say we've accomplished
direction? I think that a UBI has other issues that are structural. Like, for example, I imagine that, like, obviously, if we want to go into a complete hypothetical where every person in the world just received $3,000, I don't know what that even means anymore. But if we're talking about a government that provides for people's needs and allows them to seek out their desires, that's great. That's super fantastic. And I'm not entirely opposed to that system. I just, I guess this is kind of like what you're talking about is kind of like a centralized, Soviet-style communist vision, where there's like a government that takes over and mandates $3,000 a month, and then you have an economy you can participate in, kind of like mostly willingly, though there's, you know, still some aspects. I think it's a huge step in the right direction. Now, if it actually happens, I don't know. A lot of people seem really opposed to UBIs. UBIs seem to be really difficult to win over, and
well,
they often seem
not necessarily what I'm saying.
Right, but like that's the thing though. I mean, I can imagine all kinds of things. Like, I could also imagine a world in which aliens fly around the Earth and they deliver food directly to humans. And I think that would completely different. You think it's just. You think it's right.
Jesus Christ. Thanks for the tier 4 sub. Was that Hiffer? Hafer? How do you read your name? Hiffer. Fuck, I'm doing this real quick, sorry. I understand the cherry debate has started. Holy shit, I understand it. I'm probably just gonna end up watching the VOD. Jesus.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going, Destiny? How's your day?
Great. Well, from a utilitarian
Well, hey, that's
perspective,
pretty
we should
good.
ban coconuts. Hold on one second, one
You
second.
wanted to...
Jesus, I mean, just people spamming my shit. Fucking chat. Have you had 2 debates so far with Demon Mama, or just 1?
I have had only 1 debate so far.
Have you ran into the moralizing thing yet? Or do you understand what I mean when I say that?
I do to a certain extent. I mean, I think that with Demon Mama, it it wasn't necessarily the moralizing that caused an issue in the debate. I think that the struggle that I would say that she had, but more that I had because of the I just didn't expect this to. So normally when I talk to a socialist, they're pretty willing to define their system
Yeah.
and engage in that conversation. And to be fair, though, it seems Demon Mama leans more on the anarchist side rather than just saying she's a socialist. And in my experience, anarchists are quite hesitant to actually define their system
Because it's entirely fantastical and it's hard. And as soon as you start to define anything with concreteness, usually there's like a million different potential problems you can pick out. It's like arguing with like libertarians, kind of like as soon as somebody starts saying something like, yeah, there should be no government. Well, how do you enforce contracts? Well, there should be a central body of people that agree. Okay, well, that's a government, right? You end up like in dumb loops like this.
It's government with extra steps. I mean, I talked to my friend and I said that, you know, intellectually, we are all anarchists. Like the idea of a society where you don't have to work or face any sort of coercion of any type. You know, I mean, that sounds great to anyone, right? But as long as there are people who have the instinct towards violence or the instinct towards working outside of social norms and sort of accepted custom, which has been thus far all of human history, and it will be tomorrow, anarchy just doesn't practically make any sense. It seems like we need to have an agreed upon entity that has a monopoly of violence, that's allowed to sort of enact violence upon people, either internal or external in the form of police or military, and that, as long as it's within a democratic framework, seems to be the best way to organize society. I did think I think the part of the debate where I think the worst point, it seemed like so I don't have you watched the debate? Is that
Just
why,
people just send me little clips. I just watched your 3 minutes of like trying to get her to understand a hypothetical. Like, what if we gave a $3,000 UBI?
Oh, there was a part in the debate where it seemed like she was making class reductionist type arguments. So it seemed like what she was saying is like, oh, capitalism is one of the main reasons that
For
people have
everything. It's
hated
where
gays
racism comes
and
from.
trans
It's where
people.
misogyny comes from. It's where patriarchy comes from. I listened to another thing where
Well-
somebody was trying to make the claim that, oh, fuck, I don't remember if this is Demon Mama or Vosh, but somebody was literally saying like, oh, yeah, like this started because of capitalism, some sort of high, it might have even been the family unit. Like the only reason why we have moms and dads or whatever is because of like fucking like capitalism, like wants to sell things for Mother's Day and Father's Day, like
yes.
crazy shit like that. Yeah.
The biblical family structure was because of capitalism. I guess that's an interesting statement. But no, it seemed like, because so I talked about you know, I think, oh, a social democratic style society with regulated capitalism, welfare state, it's the best society. And she said something like, well, you know, there are many social democratic societies. Take the UK. They recently just passed anti-trans discrimination laws where you can't get trans-affirming care unless you're, I think, over the age of 16. And I was like, well, that doesn't really have anything to do with, like, I'm really making economic statements here. I'm not, obviously there have been more and less capitalist societies with more and less bigotry in them. And I'm not really sure it makes any sense to retort my mode of economic production by saying that the UK is passing anti-trans laws. And her point was that, well, it seemed that the capitalist system enables sort of a necessary exploitation of marginalized groups. But I think the issue is that under a communal framework like she advocated for, there's nothing stopping those same bigotries in the first place, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you
this
can be
is-
excluded from the commune.
I
right?
push
So-
this on a lot, and most of them don't. Well, I don't talk to these people anymore because they won't talk to me because they get frustrated.
Damn.
People seem to say things like, "Oh, like these conversations are so frustrating." A really big one we talked about was climate change. If everything was just cooperatively owned, we wouldn't be polluting as much. And well, the reason why we have problems with climate change, in my opinion, are because it's an immediate punishment for a long-term reward, right? You have to cut emissions or pay more for energy now for a long-term potential gain.
Yeah, it's
And-
like losing weight or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
And two, oftentimes the negative aspects of pollution are highly unlocal, whatever the opposite of local means. They're not localized. So, for instance, if I pollute with my car, the gas doesn't go right into my house. It's like spread out, right? And these like two things combine to create they're really bad for how humans view things because it fucks with us and our ability to like solve that problem. And when people start saying like, oh, well, if it was all just co-ops, it would be fixed. Like, well, who's to say that the people running the fossil fuel plant wouldn't vote to keep their jobs, right? Like, why? Like, and I always push on answers like that. Well, who's to say that? Why would they vote to get rid of their own jobs? Or why would they do this or that? And then they always go back to they leave communism or socialism, and then they jump back over to social democracy. We're like, well, hold on, that's okay because we would take care of these people with like a big welfare state. And I was like, okay, but now we're now we're going more liberal than socialist or communist, right? Something that I think you should push on when you talk to these people. I do this a lot. Okay, but you should demand like them to admit, listen, whatever society you envision, people are going to be forced to work jobs that they don't want to work. I think that's a really big one that you need to make people admit.
No, Demon Mom and I, we had that discussion because so when we got into the Coconut Island dick sucking analogy, she's like, well, look, no matter how great social democracy is, you still got to suck dick for coconuts, and it's like, no, but you don't have to suck dick for coconuts. There's one guy on the street saying he wants you to suck his dick for coconuts, and then there's like 17,000 other employers who are offering you, good pay, union protection, worker board membership. You've got a good welfare state to fall back on. Like, I just don't think this is the same as like sucking someone's dick for coconuts, right? It's not a fair analogy in those cases. Now,
even if you don't do that, if I land on a island, and it's not one person telling me I have to suck dick for coconuts, it's a whole commune telling me I have to suck dick for coconuts. It's the same fucking shit. What the fuck? What's the difference, right? Like the buy-in to a commune, like they still have to accept you. There's still going to be some work or dick sucking that's going to happen in exchange for you joining. Like these types of exploitative relationships are almost like I don't think there is a such thing. This might be more philosophical than anything, but I don't think there's any such thing as a one-to-one, completely equal power relationship and anywhere in humankind. Somebody's always got something that somebody else wants, and somebody else always wants to trade something for somebody. Like necessarily, if that wasn't the case, then no voluntary trade would ever take place ever in the history of all of mankind.
Yeah, the idea isn't that. Well, the idea isn't that it's necessarily equal because people have different sort of, we call them maybe an indifference curve, but people have different preferences, right? And so the idea would just be that, you're trading some amount of X for some amount of Y, and because you value the Y more than the X, and the other person values the X more than the Y, you end up with sort of a net benefit here, right? And with working at a company, what you're trading is some amount of ease of cash flow, right? Because it's probably easier to get a paycheck than it is to start your own business from scratch and do all that stuff. With the lower pay, right? It's lower reward probably, right? So the guy who owns like McDonald's is making more than the guy that works at McDonald's, right? So, and there's some coercive element to that for sure, but that's why like in a social democratic or like just a regulated sort of capitalist framework, you try to mitigate that and put as much power in the hands of workers as you can while still allowing private capital. I mean, you mentioned it sounds more like capitalism. I'm going to release a video on Saturday. I did a long video about worker co-ops, and the next one I'm releasing is on Saturday. It's 3 times as long. And one thing I go into is that it seems like some market socialists. Now, Demon Mama doesn't really claim market socialism, to be fair. She said that even, you're still sucking the dicks for coconuts, even if it's a worker cooperative, right? So it's like, okay, well, that's one thing. But it seems like a lot of market socialists have definitions of market socialism that really, I mean, call it what you want. That just seems like capitalism to me. Like if you've got like I remember watching a Richard Wolff debate, and it seemed like what Richard Wolff's definition of like his version of socialism would be was, I want mostly co-ops and less private investment.
Yeah, that's what it felt like, which is like, that's liberalism, bro.
If you have if you've got voluntary private investment, that's just capitalism at that point, right? I mean, you're giving people the option to work at either co-ops or privately held companies. You're giving people the option of either starting their own business or starting a co-op. That's basically what we have now. It's just that there's a lot happens to be more private companies than cooperatives, and so it can be a little, confusing when arguing with some socialists because Like if you're like a Bernie Sanders socialist, where really he doesn't really seem to advocate for like the workers owning the means of production, in a whole sense. It seems like the word is pointless at that point, right?
It's
So-
irritating to me when socialists will have 15 different ways to define socialism, but then when they go and they attack capitalism, it seems like they just attack all of capitalism, which doesn't make sense, because like when I get into like, well, what is your envisionment of like socialism, and then it's like somebody like Wolf will give me a definition that is capitalism, right? If you have an economic system set up with markets where the price is not dictated by a central body, but is figured out on exchange, right? Like buying and selling is how
Yeah.
prices are determined. And then when there is some amount of private investment allowed, wow, this is absolutely capitalism. It's not even like kind of socialism, or that's just 100% capitalism. Like this, it's really irritating that like you're advocating for this. Meanwhile, you will relentlessly shit on capitalism as a quote unquote socialist, where your umbrella is so wide it includes all the way from anarchists to social democrats to just liberals, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's irritating.
Yeah, I mean, if you're ultimately, I think that like it depends on what kind of market socialist you are. Now, Demon Mama seemed to be more of an anarchist, where her big problem was basically just like the commodity form, selling things for profit, and having to work are like, it seemed like those were the two
Evil.
big criticisms that Demon Mama had for the current system. And the issue is that again, even if you theoretically could get rid of the commodity form, you're always going to have to work to some extent.
Yeah,
right?
they have this
You're going to
greatest.
have to,
They have this assumption of
Yeah,
like
I was gonna
unlimited
say.
scarcity, that like, oh, well, maybe people won't have to work, or maybe everybody could be like a basket weaver or a poet in the commune, and we still get all the goods and services we need. Yeah.
Yeah, or rather that all of society's needs will just happen to be filled by people who voluntarily want to do them, right? That you're
I
not
feel
selling
like I've
anything for
outpaced him
profit,
intellectually.
so you're not necessarily getting any sort of surplus or risk adjusted return or anything, but also that these societal needs will just be filled, right? And it's like, well, to a certain extent, this is where labor markets really come in handy, because if nobody wants to do a certain thing and there's not enough people to do it, and people need that thing to be done, well, they're going to get paid more,
Yeah.
right? And so you can sort of naturally fill these gaps.
I've
But
had
in an
arguments-
anarchist commune, like
Yeah,
I don't know
I've
how you
had
do it.
arguments with these lefty people. Michael Albert, the guy that did participatory economics, was one of them. I've had these arguments where I'm like, okay, what do you do if there's a really shit job, like working at a nuclear power plant? Nobody wants to do it, but somebody needs to do it. And the things that people start to say. So I think Michael Albert started walking me down. It's like, okay, well, if there were certain jobs where the work wasn't that much fun, but we really need people to do them, they would probably be allocated more worker credits for that type of work. And it's like in a really roundabout way, you're building like the most inefficient market ever. Like at some point, like why doesn't a market handle
no,
this?
'cause
Like why are you trying to rebuild this and essentially plan this out? Like.
No, Michael Albert's thing was it might be similar to that, but I remember that debate because it was one of the first times that you debated like someone who would be considered like an academic, more
You've
of
written a book on a
Richard
system,
Wolff
yeah.
kind of guy. Yeah, and his system because essentially what his system seemed to be was that you guys talked about a hospital, and what his system seemed to be was that everyone would mostly do a few things, and generally everyone would to some extent do a lot of things. So he talked about how in Argentina, how they had he described it like it was a whole economic transformation, but from looking into it, there wasn't a lot of factories that did this. But basically, there were a few factories that were taken over by workers, basically by force. And the workers, to my knowledge, are still running those factories. So it's worker-owned and operated businesses at this point. And I guess in Argentina, the police don't... Like, if that happened in America, the police would literally just arrest, like, every single one of the people in the factory. But that didn't happen in Argentina. And he said that worker satisfaction didn't really improve to the extent that he would have expected because it's now worker-managed. And he said that the reason was because there's still managers and employees. It's just that there's no capital interest anymore. And so his distinction from like a Richard Wolff type is that the hierarchy of the individual workplace has to be collapsed. So if you had a hospital, his example was, someone who's a custodial worker might learn how to do surgery, and the surgeon might also be tasked with cleaning the hospital to a certain extent, right? And that just seemed like he was, because that.
It's like the difference he drew is there was like, he was talking about there was empowering labor, I think is what he called it, but like labor where you had more control or direction over the type of job you did versus either disempowered labor or labor where you didn't have as much. There might have been another word he used for it, but yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like what he was talking about was basically like high-skilled, high-paid labor versus lower-skilled and lower-paid labor. He didn't call it that, but that seemed to be.
Or I think it was empowered work and onerous work might have been the two words he used, but yeah.
Maybe, and so that was his system. Just seemed like, because basically you get no gains from specialists, like nobody's specialized anymore for the most part, it sounded like, right? And so you seem to,
because everybody's working every job, all the hours are kind of shuffled, and then you do a drawing for how many hours each person is going to work for in a particular job in your company per week.
Yeah, and I think that I to a certain extent it's true that nobody wants to be a custodial worker, but also to a certain extent it depends, right? So a lot of people might think of say garbage man as like a really shit job for people to have, but in a lot of places, garbage man it's a unionized job, and you get health benefits. And it seemed like, at least in my experience with, I grew up in a family of low skilled but unionized people, and in my experience, they liked their jobs, right? Even though they were, quote, like not, satisfactory, or whatever the Michael Albert term was that they liked their jobs because they had a union and representation, and it was a good opportunity. Like everyone might sort of in their head imagine that they might rather be Jeff Bezos, but not everyone has sort of the skill and connection to do that kind of thing. You just try to collapse those macro hierarchies as you can. But Michael Albert's thing with the firm level hierarchy as a problem seems like you would just basically be destroying the idea of specialized labor and
any of the gains
getting
that go along with that.
Well, yeah, exactly. And back to the Demon Mama discussion, it was that seemed to be one of the issues, was that this model definition, she wanted to not really necessarily define it for a bulk of the conversation. And one of the interesting points in the conversation was she talked about the trans thing, trans people in
the UK
are being discriminated against.
Yeah.
And my point was that, well, I mean, take gay people, for instance. Gay people have been discriminated against by society for like almost all of human history. It's only until very recently that in some countries, gay people have been sort of advantaged. And she said that her response to that was, I was like, I don't think that gay people in medieval Europe
I did watch this, and I watched this part. I don't know if you caught this, but you pushed back a little bit. And you were like, I don't think because she was like, oh no, gay people, I think we're doing okay in the medieval part. Or at some point you guys were talking about medieval, and she said something where she was like, I'm not really an expert on medieval stuff. I don't know much about it. And then like, I think it was 2 sentences later, she was like, I've read books on the medieval time period. I know a lot about it for LGBT stuff. It was literally like she reversed position in 2 sentences on it. But yeah, okay, yeah. It was. Somebody in chat told me I was remembering a Vosh combo, but it was a Demon Mama combo. I remember now. Because she was trying to make the argument too that gay people and all that were actually treated really well, and then she cringeworthily brought up the fucking Greeks or whatever, where like guys would rape little kids or whatever. Yeah. And she's like, oh yes, that's really great gay relationships. Gay relationships have been demonized for a long time in the world. It wasn't just capitalism that made gayness unpopular. It was so stupid. Yeah. Oh Jesus.
Well, even in, I mean, like to a certain extent, it might be comforting, the idea of, actually gay people were totally accepted in ancient Greece. But the reality is gay people were also treated like shit in ancient Greece, right? That's kind of a mislabeling and interpretation of that history. So gay people for the bulk of human, history have been treated quite badly. And that was the conversation. I was like, well, I don't think, people in medieval times didn't operate under capitalism, but I would say gay people were treated a fair bit worse in medieval times than they are today. And her reaction to that was sort of oh, I don't know, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, and it's like, come on,
Like,
dude, you're gonna fight.
obviously.
When I get people in conversations to start to fight me on like the most ridiculous points, I'm like, okay, like you're so scared about giving any ground to anything. Like I can tell you're not really approaching this in the best faith conversation, you know. And yeah, you'll get you get people that will start to fight you on every little thing when you're trying to build an argument. It's like, come on, really? Like, yeah.
No, I mean, look, to a certain extent, I think it was, it was a fine conversation. I think that it wasn't, super people. When I proposed the debate, everyone was saying that, oh, Demon Mama's going to be super loud and aggressive and horrible, and it might not, it's not even going to be productive. But I would say it was a productive, reasonable conversation. But there were points where it got a little frustrating to the extent that she wouldn't, for about an hour or so, she wouldn't define what her system was. And there were points here and there, like the whole, like, maybe the treatment of gay people in medieval times versus today, maybe that's a toss up. Like that seemed kind of, some unreasonable portions of the debate, but maybe I sounded unreasonable when I said social democracy is pretty sweet. So maybe there's the same. But no, yeah, you should unselfishly you should watch the debate, and hopefully you can make it through it. A bunch of people commented that they weren't able to make it all the way through because they really don't like Demon Mama. But I thought it was a fine conversation. And interestingly, it got I don't know why this is, but I actually got more views on the Demon Mama conversation than I did with Vosh, which is surprising because Vosh is like a much larger creator than Demon Mama. But I guess people just, I don't know, really wanted to see Demon Mama talk economics or something. But
if you're trying to get big on YouTube or Twitch, or this is like content creation is what you want, there is a plugin that I ultra super recommend.
Okay.
Debating.
Well, what does it do?
Debating Demon Mama. I think it's called Reddit Check, but.
All right.
Okay.
Hello.
One thing that's really nice. Do you have my stream open? Just curious.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you can see this, but like, so I'm opening up your debating Vosh video. I see that got 10,000, and then the debating Demon Mama. This it won't always check 100% like this because there's like a YouTube algorithm too. But I can check under Reddit, like, was this posted somewhere? And then you can see like what subreddits your debate is posted to, and then that can kind of give you an indication of where some views might be coming from as well.
Yeah, cool. I know that on analytics, on the analytics side of YouTube, it'll tell you. I think all it tells you is the proportion of your views that are from external sources, and that, like, I mean, I guess that's kind of useful, but it'd be better to know more.
Yeah, it's just nice to see if stuff gets posted to Reddit. For the you have way more Reddit threads about your Vosh debate though. You must have gotten more algorithmic traction on the Demon Mama one. So good job.
Oh yeah, I post. I currently post my stuff to basically communities that allow it. I think that's actually what got me banned from your. Like, I didn't get a reason for why I got banned from your Reddit, but
oh, it was. I saw the ban reason. It was spam. But yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I post my once every other week video. I guess was too much. But to be fair, some like some subreddits have rules like that, and so I did that with like the neoliberal subreddit a couple times, and one of the mods was like, we actually like your videos, but we have a rule against this. Like, okay, I mean, that's totally fine. So I don't post to any Reddits that have rule. And like with your subreddit, I assumed that's what it was. So I didn't post any videos like that ever since then. But yes, to the chat, Destiny did unban me. So I'm a free man once again in the Destiny subreddit. But yeah, but YouTube's been great so far. I think since talking to Vosh and you and Demon Mama, I think I've gone from maybe 2,000 subs to 4,600. So it's been pretty sweet. Good ride so far.
Nice. I look forward to. I think it's about 6 months until we're mortal enemies, and you're talking about me being a rapist or some shit. So it should be fun. I look forward to the fighting in the future. So. Wait, what is your personal like economic view? I guess are you like a social democrat or a socialist or?
No. So I'm a capitalist, social democrat type, capitalist. So To me, the best system in the world is probably, you know, to some marginal extent, it's one of the Nordic countries. If I had to absolutely pick one, it would probably be Norway. Would be the best economic model, and that was it. Actually, when I thought about our talk, you asked me if we disagreed on anything.
Oh.
I remembered a thing we disagreed on.
Okay.
Stock buybacks. I think that is actually something we have a disagreement over.
Okay.
But,
You got to hit me with some esoteric part of the tax code to get me off of this position. So.
Well, my thought is that it doesn't have to be too long, but my thought is that I think stock buybacks are useful for recapitalization. So if a company wants to basically take out debt and buy back stock to recapitalize itself and become more debt, leverage heavy for tax purposes, I think that's fine. The original purpose of stock buybacks was the idea that a company felt like it's undervalued, and so they could buy back their stock in order to essentially raise the value of its stock to the point that they're happy with their valuation.
Because
right?
if you feel like the true value of your company is greater than the stock value of the company, then buying shares of your company is essentially just investing in yourself, which should be positive, assuming you have other projects to invest in, right?
Exactly, and that seems like a reasonable enough reason to keep stock buybacks around. It's just that it seems like in modern history, the way that stock buybacks are used is not as a way for corporations to speculate on their own stock, but rather is just a way to return capital to shareholders. And I don't think that, like, stock buybacks to me it's not the way that you'd want companies to return capital to shareholders. If you want companies to return capital to shareholders, they should either do dividends or they should do variable dividends. To me, stock buybacks is the worst way that a company could return capital to shareholders, because really, I don't really think I'm comfortable with companies speculating on their own stock. Doesn't seem like the best, incentive structure to keep in mind. And
I guess the question is that the only legitimate argument that I think there can be related to stock buybacks and dividends is the tax preference of it. So maybe we're saying if a company is worth more and they want to return value in the way of dividends, you pay taxes on that immediately rather than appreciating their stock, which you can kind of pick and choose where to realize those gains. So you get a little bit more control, meaning less taxable, less tax receipts incurred by the government.
Yeah, and the people that sell their stock, then they pay the capital gains tax as well, and that's an option they have.
I guess the question is that at the end of the day, though, in terms of I don't agree with the framing of speculating on their own company, right? Because if you have $50,000 of capital or cash, I guess we're going to say, right? If you either pay it out in a dividend or you buy back in a stock, I mean, you're speculating either way. It's the same thing, right? The end result to both of those equations is identical, and that you're just dumping money into your company and it's going back to the people that are capitalizing your company, right?
Well, I think the difference, though, is that it doesn't reorient the balance of power of the company to a certain extent, right? That the company now doesn't own its own stock if they do a dividend, and so they're not diluting the power of certain shareholders, or perhaps magnifying them, just depending on the shares that they end up buying. And then the second part would be that you can always declare a variable dividend, or a one-time dividend, I should say, special dividend, right? You can do one-time dividends, right?
Yeah.
And if the argument is, well, the taxes are kind of fucky, so that's why stock buybacks might make sense. Well, again, that's more of an argument for why the tax code should be changed, not for stock buybacks. I think that the burden of people who are in favor of stock buybacks is to say, why should a company be allowed to speculate on their own stock? Because they can always return capital in form of one-time or regular dividends. So why is the speculation itself a valuable thing to keep in the market?
Well, when you buy back shares, I guess there's first a question. When you buy back those shares as a company, don't you normally retire the shares afterwards, or no?
You can and you can't. It just depends. So some companies might buy back their shares literally to speculate. So they might buy back their shares and then sell them later for a capital gain. But sometimes you're right. They do retire them for the purposes of recapitalizing themselves, or they might they might retire them just to return, raise the value of their stock and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
And then, so the second thing is, my understanding is that if you have $50,000, I could either go to the market and buy back my own shares and then retire those shares. I think it's usually because you want to raise value for your shareholders, the people that own stock in your company. Or I can pay $50,000 out to everybody that owns shares. Mathematically, I think those two processes are supposed to be identical in terms of 50 grand is going into this thing that's returning value to the shareholders. It seems like either way you do it, you're in a way speculating on, like, you have $50,000 to spend. If you don't have any good like NPV plus projects to put that money into, then you can either sit on the cash and do nothing, or you can just return it to shareholders. Like, either way, it's kind of a gamble, right? Like, everything you do with your cash is a gamble. You're either looking for profitable projects, or you're looking to return to shareholders so that your stock is more attractive for future investors, right?
Sure, kind of, yeah. I think that there is a difference between offloading some of your cash flow to dividends, either like regular dividends or special dividends, and actually buying back the stock and restricting the market of your stock, right?
Why? What's the difference? Why? That's what I'm curious about.
Well, because again, when you issue a dividend, you're not changing the shareholder structure of a company, right? You're not diluting the market at all in terms. Well, I say diluting, but you're not like you're not constricting the amount of stock of your company in the market.
What is that for a reasonably large company? Assuming we're not going to have because you're not going to be like all of a sudden the company is like taking away majority ownership from somebody or some group of people, right? Like, is this change in structure really meaningful for like a company listed on like the NASDAQ or the S&P 500 or whatever? Or
honestly, the answer to that is I'm not sure, right? I'm not sure if a company's ever bought back like 30% of its stock or anything like that, where you might actually see like crazy changes.
I feel like that would never happen because the board would have to approve that like major of an investment, right? There's no way that
you'd need the money to do it. Yeah, I mean to in some part that would be, if you think of like Apple or something, right? That's billions and hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So it might depend on the company and the type of cash they see, but so that's true. But I think that my argument would be more that they shouldn't be allowed to restrict that at all. I think that when companies speculate in a hard sense on their stock, you're altering the value of the stock potentially in an unreasonable way. So what I mean by that is that it's true that when you have a dividend stock versus a no dividend stock, the two companies are the exact same. A dividend stock is going to have a premium associated to it because it pays a dividend and the other one doesn't, right? But I think that when a company pays out a regular dividend, they end up with how do I put it? They're paying out a dividend to attract investors, and by that way, you could say they're speculating their stock. But I do think that when a company buys back their shares, they're actually speculating on the market itself, not on their own sort of internal company dynamics, right? When a company buys back their stock, they're going into the market.
I mean, I would argue that you're effectively doing the same thing either way. So maybe we can I either have a misunderstanding or maybe we'll argue about this. So I usually take issue. You haven't said this yet. You haven't said this phrase. You're kind of hinting at it, but not directly. I don't think you say something quite this time. But when somebody talks about like artificially inflating the value of a stock, right? It implies that there's some fundamental true value of a stock when stocks are just valued at whatever people want to buy and sell them for, right? So
Sure.
when you're kind of getting at this phrase of like, I don't know if buying back stocks is a good way of raising the value of a stock by, I'm going to say like artificially restricting the amount of like flow to the market or stock of the market or issued stock or whatever. I mean, we can say that, but arguably when you're paying variable dividends, aren't you kind of trying to do the same thing? Aren't you trying to make your stock appear more attractive? Given all else equal, if I can buy stock between two companies and they have regular dividends that are the same, but I see, well, this company issues, they have variable dividends and they're actually pretty favorable all the time. Aren't you kind of still making your stock more attractive in that way? Whether you do a buyback to restrict the amount of stock in the market or whether you do variable dividends to make your stock more attractive to people looking for dividends when they buy stock?
No, you are. Yeah, to a certain extent, every company, every action they take, in theory, every action they take is to make their stock more attractive, right?
Yeah.
And So whether, like for instance, like whether Vosh might say, donating to charity or doing PR events or doing having a maybe appointing like a famous board of directors, like a lot of these big companies have just basically celebrities as their board, stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every individual action in theory would just be to return sort of capital value or literal sort of cash to your shareholders, right? So in that way, yes. So both of these, like I said, are trying to make your stock more attractive, right? My issue really is just that, in my view, the best, the efficient market hypothesis, where the market might be containing all of the possible
Information for buying, selling, and pricing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that when a company buys its own stock, they necessarily have information that the market doesn't have. So to a certain extent, they might be biasing the market in one way or another. And to another extent,
I understand what you're saying. Just real quick,
Yeah,
because this is how I'm always going to push. So whenever you give an issue related to stock buybacks, I'm going to be pushing and I'm going to saying, isn't paying a dividend essentially doing the same thing? That's usually my question. So like, for instance, you just said that when a company engages in a stock buyback, they're influencing the value of their stock, but they're doing so with information that other actors in the market aren't necessarily privy to. But I mean, like, again, you could say the same thing with dividends, right? If you've decided that you're able to pay out a huge sum of money in dividends and not invested in some other profitable venture, you're also sending signals to the market, right? Every company's action necessarily is going to be done, one, with information private to that company that's not publicly available, and then two, it's going to be sending signals to the market that other people can then act on afterwards. That's not going to be unique to buybacks, I would assume, right? It's going to be the same with a dividend payout anyway, no?
That's a good point. I've never heard the point like that before. I would say that that is pretty convincing. I think that my only response to that would be that, again, the uniqueness of a share buyback is that you're taking shares out of the market voluntarily, to be fair. People have to sell them to you to get them. Nobody's, the company isn't forcibly buying back their stock or anything, but they're engaging in open market activities, buying back their shares, doing with it as they please, either holding it, canceling it, or giving it to employees or something like that. I don't know. At that point, I think that alters the market potentially in a more significant way than just giving a special dividend does. Because when you give a special dividend, you're not actually changing the share structure of a company at all, or anything like that. So I think that the usefulness of a share buyback might be twofold, to be fair. I thought of another reason. One is recapitalizing yourself. And the second one might be like, maybe buying back your shares is like a transitive way to afford your dividend. Like if you've got 10 million shares, but you don't want to cut your dividend, maybe you could buy back shares and then that like decreases your dividend obligation over time. That seems kind of weird, but I guess that's like theoretically another use for share buybacks. But no, that's the disagreement. I think is that corporations that buy back their stock.
Wait, I have a question about that.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if that's true. I'm going to ask because I don't know. My assumption would be is that dividends that are paid to a company are probably based off of your either total revenue or maybe even total profit. I doubt they're based on the number of outstanding shares. That'd be my guess. Like if I had a company with 100 shares that were publicly available, if I issued another 100 shares, I'm not doubling the obligations I have to pay on my dividends. The dividends are probably being cut in half. That'd be my guess. So if I had outstanding 200 shares and I bought back 100, I would still pay the same dividends next quarter. It would just be twice as much to each shareholder. That'd be my guess.
So my answer to this is that theoretically, you're right. That could happen. But typically, from my experience, like working at the company that I work at, for instance, one thing that you have to keep into account whenever you think about equity financing, where you issue shares to pay for something, you do take into account the increased obligation to pay dividends, because typically the way that the board of a company will announce a share is the board will be like, because technically regular and variable dividends are the same, because the board still technically approves like regular dividends every quarter.
Sure.
But what'll happen is the board will say, we approve a dividend of 25 cents a share for shareholders payable this date, right? For shareholders of this date. And if you issue like 1 million shares, well, companies are incredibly remiss to cut the actual amount of dividend that they pay.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're remiss to even keep it the same. A lot of times they'll increase it like a penny every year, every quarter or something. And so when you issue extra shares, it's typically under the assumption, especially for new shareholders, that you're going to get the same dividend that the other shareholders are going to get. Right. But you're right. I mean, maybe there could be examples of companies that like they issue 10% more shares and then they cut 10% of the dividend.
Now what you're talking about, that
I
would
think
be
that's-
very
I think
sneaky
that's-
if that was the case. If a company did like a stock buyback where they bought back 50% of their stock and then they cut their dividends in half, that would be a sneaky way for a company to hold on to more money. But my guess would be that a board of directors, well, actually, I feel like that would never happen because everybody is incentivized for that not to happen. So a CEO that is being compensated in stock wouldn't like that. And then the board, who all own huge portions of stock, also wouldn't like that unless they have some really ultra special way of returning capital to like higher value shareholders or something that would fuck over everybody else. But I think at that point, like fiduciary responsibility and shit, you would end up getting legally fucked. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying is I don't think the hypothetical of like, oh, well, because it seemed you asked the question, so I don't think a company would normally issue shares and then cut their dividend. Normally, it's just that if you plan on financing anything with equity and you pay a dividend, to be fair, at least I don't know if most companies don't pay a dividend, but like quite a large number of them don't.
Yeah, I think
If
it's
you pay a
becoming more
dividend-
popular not to, especially in the tech world, because you just want to explosively grow your company and fuck dividends. You're just trying to get rich off of off a company that goes huge or whatever.
Yeah, selling the stock or whatever. Yeah, and to be fair, that's worked for most tech investors. I mean, you look. There was one. It was like if you bought an iPad in 2008 or something, whenever they came out, if you bought the iPad versus Apple stock, the iPad is worth basically nothing after whatever 13 years, but the Apple stock would be worth like almost 50 grand, something ridiculous. So, it's worked for most people in the tech industry. But basically, when you issue equity, you're probably going to be taking into account that your dividend's going to either remain the same or continue on some regular growth, and so then you're going to end up paying. You get the financing from the equity. Sure, you get that cash flow, you get that money injection, I should say, but you're going to end up paying that amount in dividend over time. Similar to like if you refinance your bonds, you might be pushing out your maturity, but you're still going to be paying the same interest. Or if you refinance at a higher rate but it pushes out, it's more interest. So stuff like that. But
Gotcha.
well, I think you've actually given me a lot to think about in regard to stock buybacks. My thought was just that originally, to me, it sounds wonky, the idea of companies speculating their own stock. You brought up the point, well, they're kind of doing that when they issue special dividends anyway. I'm still kind of stuck on the point that, well, they're still altering the makeup of their shares, and I'm not sure a company should be able to do that with cash flow versus just issuing dividends. It seems
I think
like that would exert
I would totally
too much
agree with that
influence.
for smaller companies, depending on the number of shareholders. Like, say there's like 15 shareholders of a company. I mean, like, we could both imagine mathematically, right? Let's say there's a company, there's 100 shares, and I own 30 shares, and everybody else has like 5, 10, 20 or whatever. And then eventually I buy a few more shares, and then I have my company do like big stock buybacks, and then I retire those shares, and all of a sudden I'm a majority owner, right? That would be fucked up. I don't know if that'd be illegal or not, but that would literally be like, wait, what the fuck? Like, the company just took all their capital, did a big stock buyback, retired some shares, and now this guy that had 30% has a majority stake in the company. This is fucked up. Right? I could totally see that for ownership structure changes, But I don't see that being a huge problem for like Fortune 500 or like S&P, like anything listed on a public exchange is going to be way too big to do any tomfoolery like that, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think one thing I haven't been able to find a good answer on, but maybe maybe someone like maybe Rage Pope would know the answer. He's more of a finance guy than I am, to be fair. Or I'm like a corporate finance guy. He seems to be more of a Wall Street kind of dude. Is that one thing that I would also be concerned about theoretically is that if a company could buy back its stock and then vote on its management decisions, like that seems like it could be really messed up where a company could own 5% of their shares and then they could exert that 5% of voting power on board decisions and management bonuses and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, there's no
seems
way.
like-
It has to be like retired or something, right? The stock has to get
it's
retired.
not necessarily
Because there's
no,
no
it's
way
not
that like a company
necessarily
could have a
retired.
majority ownership in itself, right? Like that would be so weird. What would that even mean?
I don't know. I mean, companies can have majority ownership of other companies. It's just a question of if they can have it to themselves. Now, I know that when a company buys a share back, it doesn't like it's not necessarily a retired share. So that share is still active. The question would just be, and I haven't been able to find an answer for this, like when I've tried to research it before, is if a company's bought back shares that they might be holding on the balance sheet, are they able to vote?
Yeah,
on
because how would that
company
even?
decisions?
Yeah, that would just seems like it would be so weird. And if it was, that would
Yeah.
like end up like recursively bouncing back to. Actually, wait. I'm pretty sure mathematically that would just work out to be exactly the same as it was anyway. Like, let's say for instance, let's say a company buys back 90% of its stock, and now the company owns 90% of its stock. Well, then the 10% of the people that still own the stock they would just be choosing what that 90% would vote on anyway. They'd probably split it based on the number of votes. So it would be the same thing anyway. Does that make sense? What I just said?
No, it does. It does. But I think that the difference would be that the company could theoretically make how do I put it? Like, if a company is accountable in minority or majority part to itself versus external shareholders, you can see how the natural investment thesis assumptions of a company could get distorted.
Yeah, but if it
Right,
was in
that-
debt to itself, or if it was owned by itself is ultimately just represented by the board anyway. No,
What do you mean?
like companies don't make the board is like the brain, the thing that's deciding what the company should do, right? The company doesn't make decisions independent of the board. That's what the board is for. So even if the company owns a ton of its own stock and doesn't retire them, the board is still ultimately choosing how the company would represent itself on the board. No.
But the board is elected by the shareholders. That's what I'm sort of saying could be a problem, is that if the board has, and to be fair, neither of us seem to know the answer, is that
Gotcha.
If the board is able to be influenced directly by corporate management, that would reverse, again, generally the accountability and sort of valuation structures that we assume.
Yeah, it would fuck everything
when-
up for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want a company voting even in minority part to a certain extent on the management of a board.
Yeah, the only thing I'm saying is that wouldn't the board decide how the company votes? Here, let's externalize this a little. Let's say that a company owns 50% of the stock of another company, right? Your company, as its own autonomous thing, isn't deciding what to do with that 50% ownership in another company. The board of that company is deciding what that 50% stock is doing, right? They're the ones exercising the voting rights.
No, not really. I mean, so it depends on the issue. So sometimes, I mean, you own stock. You've probably gotten notifications
Emails
of
of
like,
like,
hey, yeah, time to vote for this or that. Like typically, I think what shareholders directly vote on is oftentimes mostly just the board of directors. Like at least in my experience owning stock, that tends to be what you get the notifications for is, hey, it's time to elect the board of directors.
Okay.
I can't think of anything else, because everything else like dividend policy, bonuses, compensation, from bond packages. I mean, that's all pretty much always the board that takes care of that stuff. So it's kind of a representative system, but the board doesn't. It's a representative democracy in a certain extent, right? So
Yeah.
the board is acting on behalf of the shareholders. They
Shareholders
don't tell the
that allocate
shareholders
voting
how
rights to
vote.
them basically when they send out the emails and shit. I think you have the right to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Somebody,
Exactly.
I've got a
So-
guy spamming in chat a lot, or I shouldn't say spam, I'm sorry, but I think I've had two people say this. So when you buy stock as a company, when you do a stock buyback, it stays in treasury. So it's retired from the amount of float that's in the market, but it also means they can easily use
Yeah.
those shares to raise money in the market again without a very restrictive process like an IPO. But that the treasury stock doesn't necessarily allocate like voting rights or control of the company to the company, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're commenting on that directly, but it seems like what they're saying is just which is that a company can hold their own stock and sell it later. So if a company, and they're right, it's less expensive because when you issue equity, you have to hire an investment banker. They're going to take 3%, and then you raise $100 million. You have to give 3 million of them to those guys. So if you buy your stock at $10, you buy 100 shares of your stock at $10. Go.
Oh, hello?
$10 capital gain on the shares that you're buying. So, I think, that sounds right.
Okay. All right, I need to
anyway.
do sponsor stuff. So, hey, I love you. It's fun. Be careful. Okay.
All right.